For those of you that were following along, I brought up a blower motor, a module, and a blower wheel on this unit a few days ago. So here I'm going to basically tear into this guy and do the replacement of all those parts. I'm actually going to pull out the blower motor assembly and take it inside. This particular roof access, you basically just step right under the roof, so it's a very convenient roof access. So I'm going to do the repair where it's nice and dry and warm, and go ahead and let's get started. So I have basically got the panel off now here to the blower compartment. Just how I always start these videos, make sure you have no power going to the unit before you get started. Best way, obviously, just shut off the disconnect, or if you have to, go back to the breaker panel. And then once you get back to the unit, just check with a voltmeter just to fully make sure you're not going to shock yourself. So I actually am redoing a little bit of shooting on this video because when I was doing this video originally, it was extremely windy, and I went back to watch it and I couldn't hear pretty much anything. So I'm kind of piecing together a couple footage that I had from when I actually did the repair and this footage right now. One of the main things I wanted to get out was when you're getting ready to take this out, just a tip is to mark where your leads are coming out. Your electrical leads are coming out, so when you go to put the new motor back in, you know which way you need to have everything pointing. It's really easy to forget, and obviously if these plugs were over here on this end, these leads wouldn't be long enough to reach. So typically it's kind of a hassle. You got to pull everything back out and twist it, re-screw it back in, then you can plug in, but it's just kind of an extra pain in the ass hassle. So that was one of the things, and then the other one, I mean, this thing comes out really easy as far as sliding out the whole blower assembly. It's literally just 1-2 screws right here, undo my plugs and undo this ground wire, and literally this whole blower housing will slide right out. So I'm going to be taking that out into an indoor area, just to get out of the cold and the rain and everything. But yeah, that was another thing. And then lastly, when you pull this out, you'll actually be able to see there'll be a big opening here, and you typically be able to see on this particular unit it's a heat pump, and you'd be able to see the strip heat, which is a good time to just inspect it and look for anything that's obvious or standing out. This particular building it's really weird. So this blank is actually, as you can see, is still on here, and this is where typically the strip heat would slide into. So this whole building has a ton of package units, and almost all of them, and actually a lot of split units as well, and almost all of them do not have backup strip heat. So it's kind of crazy every time these heat pumps go into defrost. It literally is just going from hot to cold, hot to cold. It's been like this for years and years. I mean, probably 40 years at this building. I don't know if people are just used to it or what, but we actually have some fancier thermostats in this building now. You can literally see it on like a graph showing hot, cold, but overall it heats the building more than it's cooling it. So it goes up to a set point. Something we've been kind of doing now with the newer technologies that are out and everything. We've been slowly changing out stuff on this building. A lot of the splits have been getting changed out to city multi, and then the package units, when we can, we've been putting in gas packs, just because there is gas available in this area now. That didn't used to be available back when the building was built, but now they have gas lines up here, so we've been putting in gas packs when we can, just to kind of make the system work how they were designed to work, and not kind of having this hot cold deal going on. But the ones that we have put city multis in, people have been extremely happy with. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get this all pulled out and go ahead and go forward with the blower motor change out. So on this step, I always recommend people doing this at the parts house or at your shop, just basically inspecting your motor and wheel and all your parts, making sure everything looks good before you even get out to site. I always recommend spinning the shaft of the motor, making sure nothing's locked up and everything looks good there. And then do a visual inspection of your wheel. Just make sure everything looks good on it. This little clip right here is actually what they use to balance these wheels, so just make sure that's on there nice and tight and looks good. And then always make sure you have this little set screw here. Honestly, the last 2 wheels I've done, these set screws have actually not been inside. They fell out, which is obviously very easy for them to get lost at that point. So just always inspect all that before you even get out to site, so you're not creating a bunch more issues on site. I always try to keep some of these out of the old wheels just to have them. They've actually saved me in a couple binds in the past, so I usually just have like a tub in my work truck that I keep stuff like that, just that miscellaneous stuff that can save you. Also, the motor and module came together in the same box, but they're actually apart. So, like I was saying earlier, you just had to plug this little plug right here on the module, and then it comes with these screws. There's 2 different lengths. You just have to match up what length you need. This is another thing I recommend keeping, is the longer screws in that same kind of tub, just to have. It might save you in a bind. A lot of times these modules are what fails, and I've seen quite a few where this little guy right here has been just scorched on the old one. So it's just something to kind of check, but like I said, I always do both at the same time. There's no point. I already have everything ripped apart. I may as well do it all at once. So now that I've inspected all my parts, everything looked good. I basically just need to remove these 3 screws, and then on this back side of this blower motor assembly, I just need to undo this little set screw. I usually try to clean the shaft up a little bit, just so everything slides through. Typically add a couple droplets of oil to get the old motor to slide out. If this is giving you issues, these ultimate pullers honestly are great. You can kind of see in the background on the picture how they work, but essentially this bottom here mounts on this little hub right here, and then this middle rod in the middle will push down on the shaft and actually push it out. Definitely has saved me in a lot of binds when I can't get them apart, but most of the time they, can slip right out without adding a little bit of oil and loosening them up. A lot of times there's a flat side on this shaft. If you put your crescent wrench on here, you can kind of break it up and loosen up the shaft from the blower wheel. A lot of times that almost always works for me, but there's those times when that ultimate puller has saved my ass. So I've done all the tricks I can usually do to get this wheel and motor apart. Like I said, I've loosened this up by spinning it. I can get it to freely spin on here. I added some oil, cleaned this up with steel wool because there was a lot of rust on it. It's basically the point I'm going to have to use that ultimate puller. So as you can see, I only have about an inch, maybe a hair over an inch of depth on this. So as of right now, you can see it won't actually hook up. So I'm actually going to have to get this shaft further through before I can actually even use this tool. What I'll usually do is use something to put on the end of the shaft and use a hammer to hit down to beat it back a little bit, and then once I get that all done, I can hook up the puller, and just once I get it on, I'll kind of show you once I get it on how it's used. One thing to watch for though is if you're using like an actual hammer, I wouldn't like hit directly on the end, because what happens, it starts to like mushroom out this part, and then it'll basically hit when you're trying to pull it through, and it's like almost impossible to get it through. You almost have to like grind it all around the edge. So I wouldn't do it that way. I mean, it's always been a pain in the ass for me doing it straight on there with the hammer, but yeah, I'll go ahead and get this pushed back a little bit so I can get the puller on. So I wasn't able to actually get that hub puller on there. This particular one I got lucky on. This is not normally the case, but I was trying to get this beat back on here, but there's like so much rust on the shaft that there's just no way. So I mean, if I had a grinder or something like that, it would have been nice, because it was just major rust, like thick buildup I could not get off. I got lucky to where I could actually, I took off this shroud, which I was gonna have to do anyways, and then right here I had to take this out as well, and this is all the steps I was gonna have to do anyways to get the wheel out. But I was actually able to slide the motor and wheel out through this opening. I was able to do that because I took the module off the back end of the motor here. It just gave me the clearances I needed to get through. This is not normally the case. That's one of the few times that's ever actually worked for me. But yeah, that's what I did now. So I'm gonna get this new wheel dropped in. You just want to make sure that your set screw is on the right side. It's not on the same side as the motor. So it needs to be on the opposite side of the motor so you can actually tighten it. So I'm going to drop this in here, and then I'm going to put back together all those pieces you just saw me take off, the little shroud around it and everything. I get all that stuff put in, and then I'll get this belly band. That's the other thing. I was able to loosen this up off the old motor to get it out. That's the only reason why all that stuff just worked that I tried. But I'm gonna get this on the new motor as well. Drop that in to the blower housing and get everything kind of tightened up. I'll show you here in a few seconds where I'm at. So I got the new belly band around this new motor. I just kind of slid it in to make sure all my clearances are good, nothing's gonna be grinding or anything. Definitely don't forget on this new module to plug it into your motor, otherwise that'd be a huge pain to find out later. But you can see there's basically a little dimple here on the electrical. There's also a little dimple right here, so you just have to line that up. Everything should line up. There should be no really forcing anything on this. Once you get it lined up, you're going to take these two little screws and basically screw the module onto this motor here. So earlier, I don't know if you remember that mark I made for the electrical. This is when that comes crucial to remember where everything is supposed to be lined up. But I know my plugs right here need to line up with my red mark, so everything will plug in good. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get this all put back together and then go on to the next step here. So I have that module put onto the motor now. I got these two screws dropped in. I usually will hand tighten them first just to make sure I'm not going to cross thread or anything like that. Once I get that started, I just secure them on there nice and tight, and then I'll put these screws in on the bracket, and then I'll flip it over here and put that set screw from the blower wheel onto the shaft. So I have all the screws in here on this bracket, the motor bracket. Next, I'm going to make sure this wheel lines up pretty much centered in this in the blower housing. So to get it centered, you just have to basically tap it in. It should slide in. I mean, you can find out pretty quickly that it's not grinding or hitting the sides or anything like that of the blower housing. Once you get that step done, the biggest thing is making sure you tighten this, and definitely don't forget this step because you'll have to pull everything apart to get to it. But you can see on the shaft there's a flat side. On this little set screw, you just want to tighten it nice and securely onto the flat side of the motor shaft. Once you get all that done, I give it a free spin, just make sure nothing's grinding, hitting, anything like that. It's better to find out now when everything's out than once you get it back in. But once I get this all secure and in, then I can go ahead and slide this back into the package unit. So as you can see, I got the whole blower motor housing put back in. It was just basically these two screws down here
and definitely make sure you hook up this ground wire again. You can see that little red mark of where we need to have our wires line up. Everything lined up good on that. I highly recommend just kind of blowing these out before you plug them in. Just make sure nothing got in there or anything like that. Sometimes you can get a bad connection if like a little chunk of dirt or fuzzball falls in there. After I get everything in here, I always give it one more spin once it's actually in, because sometimes the frame can get a little contorted when you're pushing it back in or when you put a set screw in. So everything looks smooth there, so I'm going to apply power back to the unit here and go ahead and test it, make sure everything looks good. So I like to test everything from the thermostat just so I can catch anything, so I don't have a callback on anything that was silly, like the system being set to cool mode or off or something like that. So I went down, turned it on with the thermostat. Everything looks really good. Kicked on. Now basically all I usually do, I've said this in other videos, is I like to leave a note. I usually either write it with Sharpie inside on a panel or leave a note on, like, we have little paper note cards we have with our company logo on it and stuff. So sometimes I'll leave those in the unit as well, just so future service techs know some of the history on the equipment. It's just something that I like to do. It helps me out, helps other techs out. So this job is one of those prime examples of why we usually bring the wheel as well. You just never know when you might run into something weird like that, or say you're trying to get that off and I did get it apart, but now I dented up my wheel and now you have an out of balance wheel. It just makes life easier, you know, just easier the better for us out in the field. So that's one of the main reasons why we always kind of order that as well. Sometimes it's totally not needed, but for the most part it always kind of makes life easier. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And you know, I would like to hear maybe what some of the other techs do to kind of get those motors apart from the blower wheel. I know everyone has their own ways of doing things, and I always like hearing a new thing. So if you have another way, I mean, please leave a comment down below.